All right, welcome to a U of St. Joseph podcast, April edition. As I mentioned last month that I was going to have a guest on and we were going to have a special episode.
Yay.
April was last month, and I said we were going to have a new podcast in May. Thank you for correcting me.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yes. So I'm here with my good friend, Mary Catherine Keeper-Baird. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Nice work.
Thank you. And we have known each other for roughly 43 years.
Estimate. Yeah.
Probably on the lean side.
Because we're old.
And yes. So in May, we kick off the month of May with the Feast of St. Joseph the Worker, which ties well into this podcast. But then the whole month of May is the month of Mary, which I guess reminded me of and said, let's do this in May, not April, because we're going to do it in April. Sorry. So that ties in together because this episode is going to be called Joseph and Mary Talk About Joseph and Mary. And,
Oh, good.
and more so, what it's like to be named after a saint. And more importantly, even if you're not named after a saint, the benefits and the values and the cool things that you can have when you have a good devotion to a saint and use them as kind of a guide to bring you closer to Christ.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Cool. But before we do
I'm ready to go, obviously.
All right. Before we do that, we are going to drink because if you listen to my March episode, I talked about the very sad state of affairs and how I am no longer Irish. But I believe you are a little bit Irish.
I'm not.
You're not
I'm
Irish.
not. I'm 80% Scottish.
That's close.
it's acceptable.
Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
80%. So that's like 40% Irish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's like half and half. It's just confused.
Yeah. So I was gonna say you sell yourself as an Irish person pretty well. So
Because
thought
I
for the past
drink
40
Irish.
47 years I thought you were Irish, but Scottish is pretty close.
Scottish.
So to rub it in my face, we're gonna have an Irish car bomb. The benefit to me is I get to have an Irish car bomb, which is one of the best drinks in the world.
Yes. And is my favorite drink.
It should be everybody's favorite.
That's true. Yeah.
So with that, do you want to pour the Jameson?
We got to pour the cream first.
We have to pour first?
Yeah.
There's an order of operations
Yeah,
to this?
So that
You should do this.
the
You're the Irish person.
the whiskey Scottish.
Scottish persons.
The whiskey sits on top. That's why.
All gonna go with the same place.
It is. Yeah. When you do it the correct way.
The way we like to call the right way.
Like some people put them in small glasses, and that's just dumb because then the shot glass
I
doesn't.
feel like this is an exceptional amount of alcohol.
It always is. It's about the equivalent of 3 beers, is what they say.
I haven't had dinner yet.
I've
So,
only had cookies from work, so
This is gonna be a good
this
podcast.
is gonna be great.
All right.
Okay. So to Joseph and Mary.
To Joseph and Mary.
Ah. That was good.
That timing was on point.
Yeah, it was. And I must not have had one in a long time because it was really good.
It is really, really good.
It was like a little cookie, like a cookie.
I think the first Irish car bomb I had was back when we were very active in the local music scene.
That sounds about right.
That's probably the
Did
first
Andrew
time I had
introduce you
one.
to them?
I think it was you actually.
Oh, that sounds about right.
Um,
My brother also loved Irish.
they are probably the best bomb drink.
Yeah.
I had a Flaming Dr. Pepper's pretty good too, but it's not as good.
All I know is the Red Bull and something. I think it's a cherry bomb or something.
Okay.
It's gross. It's
Well,
gross.
Jaeger bombs.
Oh, is that?
That's Jaeger and Red Bull.
That's what I'm thinking.
Tastes kind of like a sweet tart,
Oh, really?
which is weird. Yeah, which doesn't make
My
sense.
college experience did not teach me that it tasted like a sweet tart.
Well, it depends on what stage that you started drinking it. So
true. Anyway.
one thing with the St. Joseph, a U of St. Joseph podcast, I was thinking about having a drink every time.
Okay.
And so I asked my sister, because she has a book called like Drinking with the Saints or Get Hammered with the Holy or something like that.
I think I've heard of it. Anyway.
And I'm like, what drink does St. Joseph is he, they have for his name? And she's like, the Sazerac, which I've never heard of.
No.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm looking up. And the main liquor is absinthe.
Oh, goodness.
I'm like, well, that's cool, but like I had absinthe once, and I was not a fan. So I'm like, I don't really want to buy a whole bottle of it and then drink a drink I don't really know that I want to have.
What was the rest of it?
That's all I really remember.
Oh, okay.
The rest of it sounded good. I was like, if I mixed it with something else, but then it wouldn't be the St. Joseph drink. And we all know that that's probably what he ordered from the historical documents.
Obviously, like isn't it in the, well,
It's probably in the Bible.
it's probably in the
somewhere.
Bible.
It's-
Absinthe
it's a-
sounds like a biblical drink.
right. I mean, it's lost in translation probably, but it's in
It's probably under ale. It's fine.
So this drink, just for reference, if you want to know how to make it, it's very similar to the Trinity. 3 things in one drink. I hope that's not sacrilegious.
I've never thought of that one. But it's great. Yeah.
But it is Guinness,
Mhm.
Irish cream, and Irish whiskey. Specifically, if you want to make it the right way,
Yes.
Bailey's Irish cream and Jameson Irish whiskey.
Yes. And
Right.
always put it in a pint glass.
And in a pint glass, and then you gotta have a shot glass because the whiskey and the Irish cream have to be in a shot glass, and you saw how that went.
Yes. And it will, if you do not drink it fast enough, it will curdle. So that's the reason you have
You
to
have to
chug
drink
it.
it fast. It's
So-
not an enjoyable drink to drink slowly.
No, it wouldn't.
But taste it all mixes surprisingly well when you drink it quickly.
Yes. It kind of tastes like an oatmeal cookie, is what I always think of.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I don't want to think that way because I hate oatmeal cookies.
Okay, so never mind.
But if you like them,
There you
there's a description.
Anyway.
Maybe you had someone who baked better oatmeal cookies than most people have better out.
Yeah, I didn't have ones with raisins in it. though.
Well, that
Yeah.
helps maybe because when I see the raisins, I'm like, ooh, chocolate chip. And then I'm like, who gave me this pill? So
It does desecrate a cookie a little bit. I
It
hate
does.
raisins. Yeah. So you just gotta make them without raisins.
okay.
So maybe that's
then,
what I
then
do.
you could be like, this is good because I wasn't expecting it to be something other than what it is.
It was deceptive.
Maybe I could enjoy it now. All right. So after that digression, which was amazing, we should just do that from now on.
I like that. This is about St. Joseph, though, not
Yes.
about drinking. Oh, you'd be
Yes.
drinking with St. Joseph.
Drinking with St. Joseph.
Yeah.
In fact, you can see I didn't quite get all mine. It's starting to curdle. Yeah, I'm not gonna finish it. So.
Yeah.
Your name is Mary,
It is.
and I'm assuming that is directly after our Blessed Mother.
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
That was intentional.
Yeah.
Not by chance.
No.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you have a few tattoos.
I
I
do.
believe your first tattoo,
Look at you.
Ave Maria, right?
Yes.
And it's on your
It's
foot.
on my foot. That's amazing that you remember that. Well, my second tattoo, Joseph attended.
I was there
It
for
was
your
a
second
very
tattoo.
Big deal.
Yes.
So anyway.
I also
yeah.
remember very distinctly the guy talking about how his mother had never seen any of his tattoos, and he had sleeves, like sleeves of tattoos.
That's right.
He's like, yeah, my mom doesn't know I have tattoos. I'm like, you're a tattoo artist. How does she?
And you're
He's like,
covered.
no, I have to wear long sleeves every time I go to my parents, no matter what season. I'm like, how is that possible? But,
Yeah.
now Ave Maria,
Yes.
that is Latin for
Hail Mary.
Hail Mary.
Yes.
Now that was also after Mother Mary, or was that just really pretentious?
No, it was after Mary, mostly because one, I do have a devotion to the Blessed Mother, but also because I knew if my mom saw it, she couldn't get super mad at me because it was dedicated to our Blessed Mother. So I was like, if she sees it,
Clever.
which she did, she would just be, I was like, Mom, it's for the Blessed Mother.
And then once he's over the first one, then it's kind of carte blanche,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So perfect.
you just stick with like this like saint quotes and stuff. And
Yep.
you're like, Mom, this is for like guidance in my
Mhm.
life.
Has it been?
It has.
I mean, you see it every day, probably, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, unless you sleep in your socks and
No, I
keep
hate
them on the next day.
No, yeah, it has. It's a reminder that like if I'm stressed or whatever, I will say Hail Mary. And also like just when I've struggled with my faith and questioned it, it's like there's a reason why I put it there permanently, and it kind of has served that purpose, which is to remind me that I do have that dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as far as I'm not to go into a whole tattoo tangent, but I think if you're going to get something permanent, right, you want it to be meaningful and you want it to be impactful. You know, I may make some enemies with this statement, but like I think I've heard people be like, "Well, you don't need to know what my tattoos are about." I'm like, "Well, you did put a permanent picture on your body, so I feel like it should mean something, you know,
Yeah.
external." So if it has that impact, now I got a tattoo as well, and I don't want to say that because Mrs. Bacala won't respect me anymore. But I got a tattoo as well, and similarly, it's not after a saint, but it's an image of the Sacred Heart with 3 crosses in it. And when I showed my mom, she said, "I love it," which I think was her way of not crying, but
and not disowning you.
and at least being glad that it was a religious tattoo, not just like, you know, the devil on my arm.
Or mermaid.
Or mermaid. Well, I mean, that we could probably pitch somehow.
Some holy title in there, yeah.
So do you ever feel like having a and I'll answer this question too, because I am also named after Joseph, as
Yeah.
I've mentioned previously.
With Mary and Joseph.
But absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel when you like think about the fact that you are named, this isn't a fair question, by the way, that you are named after the Blessed Mother, do you ever feel like that's a daunting task? Like, does that ever bother you? Like, oh man, she was like the most perfect human ever. And I mean, I'm pretty close, but I'm like not quite there.
Well, I have tattoos, so I'm obviously not. No. Yeah, I think so. I think it bothered me more when I was younger because my mom always constantly reminded me that I was married, or I was married. Oh my God. I was named after the most perfect woman that's ever lived. And I think it's just one of those things where you kind of have to like take it apart and just be like, okay, I am honored to carry this name.
Mhm.
And in that way, I am like, you take it as an honor more so
Sure.
than like a daunt. And that I had to really kind of like work with because
Sure.
because everyone like, we would go to like airports and people would be like, oh, you're obviously Catholic. And I'm like, yes. And when you're 11 or 12, like you're like, I don't, this is how I'm identified. But no, I think it's become something that's been a guide for me and a reminder. It's a constant reminder, similar to the tattoo of like how important our faith was to my mom
Mhm.
and my dad, but also like how it is important to me, even if I struggle with it sometimes.
Sure.
So,
Well, similar to the tattoo, it's not really something you can get away from.
nope.
You know, so
Nope.
it's always going to be there reminding you
Yep.
when you struggle or you have challenges, or you know, I think we all go through downtimes and we struggle with our beliefs and our faith, but you know, having that name makes it, and especially when your mother reminds you of that all the time,
All the time.
it's going to be hard to go, yeah, well, I reject that.
Yep.
I mean, I know she was like 14 and she agreed to have Jesus, but whatever, my life's hard too.
My life is very difficult.
So,
No.
yeah, so the reason I asked that question, my
Yeah.
mom is named after one of the most badass saints. She's named after Joan of Arc.
Oh, so good.
And she grew up like, she's always telling me, like, I hated being named after her because I was like, I can't live up to that.
Oh, wow.
And my thought was, well, you're more holy than I'll ever be. I don't feel that way as much. I mean, if I start to go there, yeah, I realize I'm not that good.
Yeah.
But I don't think about it that often, which means I'm just, like I said, not that holy, apparently.
It doesn't even cross my mind that
I'm like,
much.
I do my best, all right?
I'm kind of like him.
Yeah, we have similarities, like a name and kids, well, you know, and a wife.
A kid.
There's a few things there that correlate. But if I were to go there, I'd realize like I don't measure up at all.
I feel like that can send you down to like a deep hole, though.
It sure could.
Of like, because both of us, I think, have names that are very prominent and very like, so the saint, like, obviously the saints are amazing, but like the saints were flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
So I think about like Mary, and it's like Mary didn't even have a flaw.
Yeah, that is rough.
That's rough.
That's
like,
a good point. I have not thought of that.
Like one of the reasons I love the saints, and I always will like identify with the saints, is the fact that they are flawed and they're still saints. So it's like, oh, it's possible for us to be.
We have a chance.
We have
right?
a chance. We can do this. But when you have a name like Mary, it's like there's no leeway.
Right. You don't get to go, well, you know, well, you didn't, I mean, you just were awesome always. So
Yeah,
that's
all the
cool.
Like, this is
Sure.
always one of my favorite questions that people ask, like, confirmation, kids who get confirmed. Did Mary ever get angry at Jesus? Because is that technically a sin? And so they marry sin. And it's like,
Yeah.
Like-
I mean, that's gotta be hard to wrap your mind around. I would think yes. I mean, just to answer the question, I think she did too. Well, no,
He's a
but
monk.
guess what did he do wrong? So being
That's
angry
true.
isn't wrong, but Jesus wasn't sinning, so like, what would she have to yell at him about? One of
But-
them would have lost their patience incorrectly.
well, but it's like, I feel like on Mary's end, it's like righteous anger, which is okay.
Sure.
But like,
She probably got angry with Joseph. I mean, he was probably like, the one sinner in the family, so.
yeah. I mean, he did question why she was pregnant.
Right.
So it's like,
Right.
come on.
Which I feel like is reasonable.
Oh,
Like,
for sure.
I feel like I, would probably have to ask
Questionable.
that question if, I didn't do certain things that would lead to certain things
That would lead
with a
to a
certain
baby.
person.
Yeah. See, but like with Jesus, it's like, when does he enter the age of reason?
Reason,
So
sure.
like, could he have been sassy when he was little? Probably, because he wasn't in the
True.
age. I don't know.
Right?
When the kids ask me
It
that,
is.
I'm just like,
And I asked my brother-in-law, I was doing this podcast, and before one of them, I called my brother-in-law, who's has a PhD in theology, so he's like a pretty big deal. His name is Dr. Mike, and you
Ooh.
shall refer to him as such.
I will never call him just Mike.
Good. Don't. I mean, just
Super offensive.
just to make him feel awkward, make sure you don't. But I called him once before a podcast because I was going to say something, and I was like, I sent him a text, of course. I'm like, because what did Jesus like know whatever? Did he know he was the Son of God like when he was a baby? Kind of a question.
Yeah.
And he's like, then he asked me like 4 follow-up questions, and I'm like, yes or no? He's like, that's not a thing. Like, so then I called him and I had to talk for like a year, and I got a lot of new information that I did not have. But apparently some of it is not totally settled. Like there's
I feel like that's probably the case. Like, do we know what Jesus was thinking at that time?
So what I ended with was like, if I surmise that this is possible, am I okay? He's like, yeah, that'd be one of the lines of thinking. I'm like, okay, just wanted to make sure.
I wanted to make sure the Pope did not call me and
Exactly.
call me.
Like, if this ever gets big enough where the Pope's calling me, like something cool happened, but
something cool happened, or I did something really wrong.
real bad happened. One of the two.
One of the two, yeah.
But man, I don't know where we were at that point, but
Living up to the name.
yeah, living up to the name. Thank you.
Yeah.
Certainly a daunting task. I think it's where those people that are out there, that have names that are not after saints, you guys have a tall order.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be the saints for other people's kids to be named after. So
God,
deal with it and get her done.
Oh, Chase, Dad, you need to get her done.
My entire family, my parents had 7 kids. All of them are named after saints. I think all of them are named after biblical saints, except for their least favorite child. Elena was not named after a saint. And I don't know if that's my mom about that.
I was gonna say, who was she named after? Or is it just the name they liked?
It was named after my grandma.
Oh, okay.
I mean, she's 95, so I mean, if she passes away someday and becomes a saint, then boom, problem solved. Maybe that was their thinking. Just kidding, Elena, you're not really the least favorite child, but you always say you're the favorite, so I had to drop it.
Youngest too, right?
Youngest as well, yep.
Yeah.
And the only obscure one, so we have a Mary in our family as well.
Yeah.
We have a Joseph, obviously myself. We have the mother of Mary in Anne.
Oh yeah.
And then we have Jesus' cousin in a John.
Okay.
And then we have Luke, one of the gospel writers.
One of the gospel writers, yeah.
And then Elena. And then the obscure one is Susanna. And the story behind that is my mom really wanted to name her Susanna, but she's not really, a saint that has a big name in the Bible.
Sure.
And so, true story, the day my mom went into labor, my mom's like the holiest person ever. And she was at church, like 9 months pregnant. not on a Sunday.
I was gonna say daily mass.
Daily mass. And she's like, she was praying about it because that's what holy people do. They pray about their decisions. And she was like, should I name her Suzanne or should I not? The reading that day, the reading about Saint Suzanne.
No.
Yep. True
I didn't know that story.
So then
I
she's
didn't
like,
know she was
I'm gonna name her Suzanne. And then that's why she's Susanna.
Wow.
So all biblical except for Elena.
My family does not have all biblical, I don't think. Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah. No, Megan. Megan is not a saint, but apparently is an offshoot of Margaret, who is a saint.
Okay.
Apparently. So, like, if we felt celebrated feast days, St. Margaret's feast day was when Megan got to celebrate.
Okay.
But I have Elizabeth.
Well, my wife's name is Megan,
Oh,
and she ties. So this brings us to kind of another point of if you're not named after a saint, you don't have to be named after a saint to really have that devotion and have that.
I thought you were going to say to be alive.
Or to be alive.
To be alive.
To be a good person, you don't have to be named after a saint.
Those jerks.
But how can you still tie yourself into, a role model? Because as you kind of alluded to, being named after Mary, a sinless saint, it can be very not, I won't say challenging. Well, it can be challenging to be named after a saint, but you don't have that like, well, here's where she messed up, and I can learn from that.
Yeah.
But if you are not named after a saint, you have a lot of other options to kind of tie yourself into a saint, to have that kind of role model that shows you. Yeah. Obviously, Jesus is kind of the ultimate role model, but like Mary, when they're sinless, it's kind of like, yeah, but you didn't mess up, and I do. So who should I look at for that?
Yeah.
So a couple of options. One, birthdays. So there's a saint feast day on every day of the year. Yeah. So my birthday saint is Saint John Nepomuceno. So I always thought he was really cool. He's the patron saint of confessors, I believe. And he had a really cool picture in the saint book we had growing up. So I also like that.
I also had a saint book. I do not know what the saint on my birthday is, though.
Okay. Well, you'll have to look that up because that's always good. It's always good to have a team. We need teams to get us through this world. So the other one, so Megan does that a lot, right? She doesn't have a direct name saint, but she has her birthday saint. And then the other one, we were talking about this before we started, but confirmation names. So we go through different sacraments, and you get to kind of choose your name. When I was confirmed, I always said I would have chose Joseph if I wasn't named Joseph. He's probably my favorite saint. So I'm very fortunate to be named after my favorite saint. Don't know if that's why, but the more I think about Saint Joseph and learn about Saint Joseph and ask for his intercession, the more I like him. So I've noticed that. But when I got to my confirmation, I was like, well, I got to pick another saint. I want another person on my team.
Yeah, build the team.
So what did I have? There was like a bunch of them that I couldn't pick from. When I was a kid, it was like Saint Sebastian because he's patron of sports, and that's what I like doing.
And he got shot with arrows.
Like a lot of them.
A lot of them.
And didn't die.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive.
Pretty amazing.
But I ended up going with Saint Francis of Assisi because I am a very nature person. I love animals. I love nature. So I had a really strong connection with Saint Francis of Assisi, so I picked that as my confirmation name. So there's a lot of other options. Even if you don't use your birth, maybe you look up your birthday saint and you're like, you know what? I don't relate to you at all. I mean, good for you for feeding the poor and whatnot, but man, when you went to the leper island, that's not my thing.
Good for you for getting in the saint book.
You can always just pick a saint that you're close to, So who is your confirmation name?
So mine is kind of an obscure saint. Mine is Saint Andre of Bessette.
Okay.
From Montreal, Canada. And actually, so one, I was telling Joseph this earlier, I was the only female in my confirmation group who picked a male name because technically, at that time, it was supposedly frowned upon that a girl choose a male saint because they wanted the connection with female to female, which makes sense, but also like Saint Andre had I had a very strong connection with him from the beginning because my mom found him in her research when I was 8.
Also another very holy mother, by the way.
Yes, yes. And I had leukemia. And my mom found him, and he had healed many people who had come to the Basilica of St. Joseph. Actually, now that I think about it,
Wow.
really crazy.
Dude, think about that.
He
connection.
helped build. He was a porter at the Basilica of St. Joseph in Montreal, Canada. So we went and visited, and they have his heart, which is incorruptible. So his
Oh,
heart,
really?
it's so you can see his heart. It's crazy. It's weird.
Yeah.
And as a child, you're like, this is freaky.
I'm gonna come back to that.
Yeah. And so so anyway, we went and visited his grave. Very emotional for my parents at 8. You're kind of like, whatever,
Mhm.
dead guy. And then, but yeah, and so throughout many years later, I was like, I can't think of anyone else who I can think of really cool saints
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many, but there was just a connection, and I couldn't really say I'm not going to pick him because I needed him in my court,
Sure.
like permanently, like if anything was to happen. So I did that, and he was blessed at the time. He was not a saint. And I think 2010 he was canonized as a
Okay.
saint. And the Quebec News actually called me because I had started a Facebook page that was still very early on.
That was like when
Facebook.
Facebook pages were a big deal.
Big deal. For celebration of Blessed Brother Andre becoming canonized. And they were like, you're the only person in the US who has mentioned his name.
Wow.
So I got a call from the Quebec
That
News.
is amazing.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So he was just a humble brother, Holy Cross priest, and yeah, a porter. And he was just quiet. But they had at the Basilica, they have a whole wall of the crutches and the
Sure.
pains of all the people that he healed. And I was like, this is amazing.
Well, that is amazing. It's also like just like already it had that attachment because I know I know a little bit that your family's always kind of had a strong devotion to Blessed Brother Andre. At Saint, how do you say it now? Saint Andre?
I say Saint Andre.
Okay.
Yeah. Saint Brother Andre.
But like, you know, that intercession was going on throughout your life as you were struggling with, leukemia and things like that. So it already kind of had that permanent impression on your life.
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool.
Well, and I feel like not guilty in like a bad way, but guilty not choosing him.
Well, sure.
Because I'm like, he's done so much for me.
He's done so much,
I need him.
He's been in my corner so long already.
I need him to have my back.
Sure, absolutely. And that's one thing that so for any non-Catholics listening, just for clarification, right? So saints are here to bring us to God, and any saint, whether it's the Blessed Mother or a saint, they do not replace God in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if our relationship with a saint distracts us from Jesus Christ, it is not a good relationship. All of our relationships with saints, blesseds, anybody holy really should be pointing us to Christ. If it's not doing that, we need to reevaluate that relationship. My wife always refers to them as our helpers, and we need lots of helpers.
Yeah.
So very true. You mentioned the incorruptible heart, and that's something that's just the craziest thing to me is like incorruptible saints, things like that. I don't want to get on a tangent.
Yeah.
But the Catholic Church did some weird stuff back in the day when they had incorruptible saints, because they're like, I don't know if they were primitive minded or what, but they'd be like, "Ooh, we have a saint, and they've been dead 100 years, and they look like they're dead the day they died.
Yeah.
Let's cut them up and send pieces of them everywhere."
Oh, that is very true. Yeah.
And it's weird.
Yeah.
And like, so I've seen some of the incorruptibles. I went to Europe once when I was 17, and I got to see some of the incorruptibles, which was very, very cool, but also a little bit unnerving. Fortunately, I got to see full bodies. But like, there's places where they have like fingers, which is both weird and on top of being weird, it's like, okay, I feel like after it's cut off, it should corrupt. Like, that's where my line is, and it still hasn't. So like, seeing a heart is like,
it's very
crazy. Like, you think, okay, it's detached from all the stuff. Like,
blood.
Now it's gonna do something that
it's gonna turn to dust.
Should do. That's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So are there any other saints that maybe aren't attached to you birthday-wise or, and I'll say mine, but birthday-wise or confirmation-wise or name-wise, just general saints that you feel that you have a strong devotion to, strong relationship with, or just go to generally when you need some additional intercession Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, we did not discuss this one before.
We didn't really pre-plan it all.
But
So.
at least I did somewhat before. So I would say the two that come to mind for me are St. Agnes, actually. That was the only one that was in the running along with St. Andre. I don't know why. My neighbor, for some reason, never picked up on the fact that my name was Mary Catherine.
Okay.
He heard Mary Agnes one time, and that's how I was known growing up by my neighbor. And I spent a lot of time with them because we lived in a court, and he was right there. And so he always called me Mary Agnes probably to this day. And so I learned a lot about St. Agnes, and she was really young when she got martyred. She was one of the first martyrs, like really cool, kind of badass. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
already.
Okay.
I think it's in the description, actually.
And then so this is not technically a saint. Thomas Merton.
Okay.
He's one of my.
Isn't he?
He's not.
Really?
Yeah. And I always think of him as because there's the Thomas Merton prayer.
Yeah.
Which we used on Andrew's note card, and so he's just so thoughtful, and his as an author has really changed my view on faith with God, and walking the vulnerability about being Catholic and being close to God, and how hard that can be, and how much of a struggle it can be. But also bringing it back to what joy comes from being in a relationship with God. Sure. And so out of anyone, or one of the many saints, I don't know. I always thought he was a saint until recently.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing to me because I thought so as well.
Yeah, so check out his books if you haven't read them. They're amazing. But he also, talking about the kind of you were saying, the relationship with God and having those helpers. He is a great example of a helper. Sure. Always talking about how are you building your relationship with God, not me as the author, relationship with God. So Thomas Merton to me has changed my life. And in my adult life, I would say he was more pivotal than anyone else. Sure. And then probably St. Agnes as a child. So
sure. Okay.
What's yours?
Quick, man, I think this question will come back. So obviously I said St. Joseph, St. Francis of Assisi. One that comes up a lot, not so much for me that I feel like I need to mention is St. Teresa the Little Flower. Just because she always had that little way, that simple way of, where a lot of times you look at saints and you're like, geez, I can't. I mean, I just can't because I don't want to. But she showed us the path to holiness through simple things. So I know a lot of people have a strong relationship with her. I have that connection. I don't feel like I have the personal relationship with St. Teresa the Little Flower. St. Bernadette is one actually that I have a really strong relationship with, and for the weirdest of reasons. Yeah. So I think it was her, and it was St. Faustina as well. Okay. So St. Bernadette, I got to go to see the font in Lourdes and bathe in it, which was one of the most awkward experiences ever. I know I'm supposed to say that was it's beautiful. It was awkward and strange. I mean, I'd do it again if I was there, but it was weird. Just putting it out there. It was
things with the saints kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, you go bathe in a pool with just people there, and they're like, "You can't wear your clothes." Well, that's weird. Well, here's a towel. Okay, why is it wet? 100 other people used it. Well, that's gross. Also, it's the middle of winter, and I'm like, well, is this going to be warm? Do you heat? We don't want to taint the holy water, so it is not heated. So you go into this thing, and then two guys carry you, and they're like, okay, we're going to dunk you underwater. And they dunk you underwater, and it's negative 4,000 degrees. And then they have the dinkiest little Mary statue on the end of it. Literally the one you can buy for 99 cents at any Christian bookstore. And it's standing there, and they're like, say a Hail Mary. I'm like, for what? I can't even speak right now because I'm frozen to death.
I'm thinking it.
And then you say your Hail Mary, and you're shaking, and they get you out of the pool, and then there's 400 people behind you, you can go put your clothes on now. And they're like, okay. And you walk into this tented room with a bunch of other people, and there's no lockers. I mean, it's just this space. I'm not selling this well at all.
Don't ever go there.
But anyways, like I said, I'd do it again if that makes me weird or not.
Summer.
But yeah, in the summer. But the reason is because so when I was a kid, my mom made a big deal Saint Feast Day stuff. I think it was for canonization actually. Huh. And And if not, I'm totally messing this up. But and I've just had a devotion to the wrong saint all these years. But I want to say their canonization. I was a kid. I was like 13 years old, and I wanted to make some extra money. And my mom's like, if you pray to these saints on their canonization days, the day they're going to be canonized, there's special graces. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to pray for a job because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And like literally that day, a friend of ours called my mom and was like, do you have anybody that would like to mow our lawn once a week for $20 each time? And she's like, Joe, weren't you saying you wanted a job? I'm like, yeah, I just wanted to make some extra money. She's like, well, so-and-so wants you to mow the lawn every week for $20 a week. I was like, sweet. And back in 1934, $20 was a lot of money,
which would also be around the time of the Depression. So that obviously,
and I was surprised they had it.
Yeah.
So,
these are rich people.
So like it was just that kind of, as a kid, I think sometimes God reveals himself to you a little more automatic, sometimes a little more black and white. As you first are in the early stages of that relationship, and so that was really prominent. So I've always kind of maintained that one.
But to think that you still recognize that now, like that happened a while ago, and so like to recognize that today, like I always say, like when I pray, I'm always like, I need like a neon sign. Yeah, like I'm not great at the subtle things.
How many of them do I need before it equals what?
Poster board, like the billboard signs, like that's what I need. And I always say that to God. And I feel like God understands me well enough to know that I need those. Because God knows us, whatever. But I'm like, you need to like 2x4 across my face. So obviously something pretty
he did that. And so I, like I said, I've maintained that. I had the opportunity to go to the font. Got to see her house that she grew up in. So it's a very cool experience. So I always had that strong connection. I on my confirmation, I struggled because I really liked St. Maximilian Kolbe. Loved that guy. St. Padre Pio is a big one. So there's so many when you start to think about it, and then you're like, oh man, how do I pick one? Good thing you don't have to. You can pick a lot of them. A lot of them. So just a couple to throw out there. You got St. Anthony if you like losing things. If you
Which I do. I love losing things.
You like nature and animals like myself, there's St. Francis of Assisi. If you like barbecues, there's St. Lawrence.
It's a weird tie-in.
Cannibalism. He did say,
no, I know.
I'm done on this side.
Amazing.
So
our Saint Sebastian, like you said, was soap quartz. I always think of Saint Dymphna because Saint Dymphna is the patron saint of people who are depressed or having anxiety, which I think is super
and mental health and things like that. And she's a huge one in our family as well. I have a lot of family members that struggle with. I think honestly, in this day and age, we all have someone. That could use some support from Saint Dymphna for sure. And then, honestly, one of the most badass saints, and I mentioned her already, is Saint Joan of Arc. I mean, if you want to look at like just crazy heroic, she was like
girl power,
big time. 16-year-old leads an army, gets shot in the neck, survives, and then gets burned to death for like no reason whatsoever.
Which is by far the worst death, I think.
Easily. Like your eyes burn, you can't breathe, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, people are probably throwing things at your head. And you're a kid. You're 16 years old.
And all she did was call out Jesus' name. I'm like, I'm sorry.
And I cannot wrap my head around, like, it's 2021, we're supposed to be like, not have as many sexist issues. Granted, we still have some, but not as many as they did in, the 1400s. But yet, like, could you imagine a 16-year-old leading an army, a 16-year-old female leading an army today? Like, how did that fly hundreds of years ago? Like, how desperate were they? No offense, but like, like, you know what?
And also someone who's hearing voices.
Right. She's hearing voices. She's a kid. And like, you know what?
Girl.
It's about the best idea we've heard so far.
We're gonna go with you.
Fun fact, if you want to learn more about her, Mark Twain wrote a book about Joan of Arc. And he claimed that it was the best book that he had ever written.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I will plug my friend Michael. who I think it's one of his favorite books. So really good book, historical fiction, really fun. The like she's leading army, right? So what are soldiers, right? They're usually the roughest, toughest, grungiest kind of people. They swear, they cuss, and so like the meanest one, I think, if I recall from the book correctly, like he wouldn't swear in front of her because he always felt bad. Like and like you just said, they really tie in kind of those characters and behaviors. Great book. Recommend it. Now Michael has a saint. Not to, like, look, Michael, we're gonna be talking about you, so I hope you listen to this.
We were talking about you before the. Yeah,
but yeah, his saint is Saint Michael the Archangel, which is a super killer one.
Also, my boyfriend's saint, not to plug here.
That's
too.
Good point.
But Michael.
Way to tie that into it.
Yeah.
So one thing, like, your name's meaning was another thing that my mom always told me. She's like, your name is Joseph, and Joseph means God shall add.
Oh yeah.
Like all these things.
Yep.
Michael means who is like God. So there's a tall order to try to put on a name.
That, and I don't know, it does not, I don't think, doesn't fall into the category of like sinless, because I don't think they are, but crazy, angel.
Right.
Like, amazing.
Right.
Okay, so I have to just quickly tell you the meaning of my name.
Okay.
Which I think is hilarious.
Okay.
It is bitter.
Bitter.
Bitter. The Hebrew term. Bitter and, well, humble is also in there, but I like to lead with bitter.
I like to lead with bitter.
I like to lead with bitter.
You need a little bit of the bitters in there.
That Mary, the sinless saint, Mother of God, named bitter.
Interesting. I'm surprised I've never heard that.
Yeah, I saw it on.
Awesome.
My mom bought a name card for me one time, and I was like, "That's great." So now I lead with that. But humble is also in there as well.
That's amazing. There's another option. So we've covered if you're named after a saint, your confirmation name, a saint you pick because you like that saint and you think that you can relate to them well. Could be.
Sorry, I have to interrupt for 1 second.
So.
I'm so sorry. Saint Jude is another one.
Yes.
Of which
I have a son. I have a son named Jude.
Impossible causes.
Ancient saint for impossible causes. Like, absolutely. Which is like, I feel like most of the things I pray about.
I was gonna say, I feel like I pray that to every saint. So I'm always like, well, I guess I'll throw Saint Jude in there because he's the patron.
Most of my prayers are like, God, if like all problems were gone and I had $1 million, I would like that. And world peace, if you could throw that in, but not required.
But I'm asking Saint Jude, so obviously you don't.
But I mean, right.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, very good point. Which my son's name is Jude. My father's middle name is Jude, which is an interesting story about that. His name is Craig, and he turned 70 last month, which is weird to me.
Happy birthday to Craig.
Yeah, and so way back then, we thought it was hard to pick a saint when you were confirmed. When they went to baptize him, it was like a really big deal if you did not have a saint for baptism.
Yep.
And so my mom was talking to, or my grandma was talking to the priest, and she's like, well, you know, we want to get baptized. You're like, what's his name? He's like, Craig. He's like, that's not a saint name. And she's like, well, what do we have to do? And they're like, well, change his name, obviously. And he's like, oh, I don't know that.
Let's hope that
the priest is like, well, what's his middle name?
Oh,
and she said Jude. And he goes, well, he's the patron saint of impossible causes, so I guess I'll let it slide.
That's awesome.
So that's how my dad got baptized.
The olden days.
The other way you can do it too is you can, if there's something you're struggling with, you know, there's usually a patron saint of that issue, like you said with Saint Dipna, right?
Yeah.
Or you can just go real obscure. So our first, mine and my wife's first child's name is Charlotte, and we say that she's named after Pope John Paul II or Saint John Paul. Which is, there is a way to get there. It's, you got to take a couple of detours, and it's not a direct line. But Charlotte is the female version of the name Charles, which is the Polish name for Charles is Karol. And before Pope John Paul II became Pope John Paul II, his name was Carol. So that is the path that Charlotte gets to.
Awesome, though.
But not that much unlike what did you say the name your sister Megan? Margaret, right? So
yeah,
and we do that kind of with Elena. I think we always kind of said her saint was Helen, which, you know, that you got to do some work there. But again, the point of it is, right, to have a saint that leads you to Christ, that you can look at as your guidance. that you can relate to, right? Because we all want to get to Christ, but it's a journey and it's a path. Doesn't happen overnight, and we need that team. We need those helpers along the way, and to have them and to know people that really reflected Christ, maybe better than I do myself. I don't want to speak for you.
No.
That
Thus
that
the
have
tattoo.
been through it, that have met some challenges,
Yeah.
that have still reflected Christ in a great way throughout some of the sinful challenges that
Yes.
that I am a part of. So
I just
yeah.
thought of something actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, completely random. I've never thought of this. So as you know, my brother passed away 2 years ago in February, and I always said that I would, like, if I ever had a son, I would want to name him Andrew.
Yep.
Even before Andrew was sick, because I love the name Andrew. Andre is French for Andrew.
Well, look at that.
And I like Andrew, my brother was like my best friend, very close. And so I just think that there is another connection that I have put in my corner to have Andrew and Andre in there.
Yeah.
So if I was to name my son Andrew, still tying into my patron,
Absolutely.
my confirmation saint.
Absolutely.
So again, just thought of that for the first time ever. And
Wow.
maybe just again, that connection to your saint can do those kind of things. And I'm not just saying that, and we talked about it before the podcast. I literally just thought of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I can attest to that. Well, I don't know that you just thought of it, but I believe you.
no, I did. That's why
And
so
but we didn't talk
flabbergasted.
about it. So
Yeah.
but that's really, really cool because sometimes I think, God brings the saints to us more than we look for them,
Oh.
right?
Yep.
And you see the things that he's put in place ahead of time, ahead of
Yeah.
schedule,
Yep.
which is really beautiful. So that's a really cool revelation.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's those, I think it is very important. When I taught confirmation classes and we talked about the saints, I always said that it was really important to not just pick one. It's so easy to pick one because you like a name or you like whatever. And I get it. But to really find one that even if you're just flipping through the saint book and one just kind of pops out and you're just like, oh, okay. It might have a really weird name, which a lot of saints do.
Yep.
But again, my boyfriend, Mike, he picked St. Gregory because he was the patron saint of music and he kind of liked music. He didn't feel any connection to him, but now Mike plays music all the time. And now he feels a connection to him. So I think in some way, St. Gregory and God was already working in his life, even if he didn't feel a connection at the time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Anyway.
And I mean, it's one of the beautiful things about being Catholic, I think, that is that, God gives us all of these helpers, these tools to help us in our journey. He knows the world that he put us into. And he didn't abandon us, not personally, but also he gave us a whole, hundreds of people. And I think that's one of the beautiful things too, is I know that my family, during our night prayers, every night we say, at the end of our night prayers, we say, Andrew and Maria, pray for us. Andrew being your brother, who obviously we believe is a saint in heaven, and Maria is our miscarriage that we had. So
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I knew about the miscarriage. I didn't know she had a name. That's great.
We named her Maria after the Blessed Mother. Yep, absolutely. So
giving her a complex.
Yep.
But now she's with Mary.
Absolutely.
Oh, amazing.
Yep. In fact, my sister Mary gave us a card when we were going through that miscarriage. It said the most beautiful thing in the world on it. Like, people, it's hard to know what to say to people in any type of a death situation. And she gave us a card, and the card said, just imagine the first thing your child saw when they opened their eyes was the face of God.
Yeah.
And I was wow, man. It still hurts, but that actually helps a bit.
Oh my gosh. And of course, it probably in the moment you're you're feeling the pain, you're in it. But now, how incredibly beautiful. I'm gonna get all teary eyed. Yeah.
So
that's amazing. That's an incredible way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So know that there's those people out there for you. There are saints out there. Don't feel any shame. Sometimes you'll find a saint that helps you for a spot in life. And, maybe that saint isn't one that you know, yeah, hopefully you continue those relationships for a long time. But you know, sometimes there's saints I have for a season, right?
Yeah.
For a season of my life, you know,
Point,
and don't feel any shame in that if you know that they were there to help you for a rough patch that you were in. And there's saints that'll be with you your whole life. I mean, they'll all be with you your whole life, but there's those ones that you'll keep those close relationships with. If you don't have any right now, you know, go find a book of the saints, or you know, there's a wonderful thing called the internet out there. You can look up saints all over the place. You can find out, you know what, I'm struggling with this. Well, who's the patron saint of it? And you will find probably 5 different choices. Go read about their history and ask them to pray for you because they are up there wanting to do that.
I mean, they're not doing anything else.
Right.
They're
not like they got a
literally
whole lot
there to help. This is what I
going
always
on.
say. Like when I say my prayers, I get a little sassy, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you're literally up there to
What
help.
better do you have?
Yeah, you're literally living in paradise. What can
Yep.
you do to help me out here?
And I think it was Saint Teresa the Little Flower that said, "I will spend my my heaven doing good on earth." So I think, you know, I struggle with, you know, I have different conversations with people that, you know, don't understand the Catholic view of the saints and how that points us to God. And I just think, you know, how tragic is that to, if you lose a loved one, to think, well, they're up there, they don't care about me. Like, no, they probably care about you more than they did when they were here.
Yeah.
So they want to help us. They see our struggles and they want to help us through them. And they are there. They are with God.
I mean,
So-
I always think to myself, like with Andrew and my mom, who is up there as well, and my other brother, Eric,
Mhm.
like they're like, I just think of it always as like, obviously not in the time when I lost them, where I was very bitter,
Right.
my namesake. But also like how cool, like that they get to be together. Like that was like one of the things, like that was probably one of the hardest things to come to terms with, but also like one of the biggest comforts to be like, they're up there. Like I hopefully will see them again someday if I live all right on this earth. But like how cool, like that they
Yep.
get, I imagine them being together, and that is one of the biggest comforts to me. So
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for spending time with me on this podcast. I think the most you know, I think this podcast does more for me than probably anybody that listens to it, because as I talk through these things and I hear some of the things that you have to share and things that you have to deal with, I always end up leaving or finishing a podcast with a new perspective and a new fire to continue continue on this journey.
Well, and hopefully it brings
so-
up, like, for me, it's like, I already have like these conversations in my head that I want to continue having with you or with other
Yep.
people, like things I never thought about, which I think is really cool. And which, like, again, opens up the doors to like conversation, which I said, like, going back to the very beginning, like the tattoo that people get on their outside of their bodies,
Right.
to me is always like a door opening for conversation,
Yep.
which I think.
Because a lot of
has
times
been.
it's hard to bring something up, but once someone asks a question, that door's open.
Absolutely.
And if you're anything like me, it doesn't close too easily.
We can go on
She'll
forever.
keep going.
We can go on.
So, well, thank you for being with me. This was awesome.
This was a blast.
I think we'll probably break this up into a few because we killed it. So
We
thank
got
you so much.
Thanks for having me. Like this is